Faced with terrible polling and the popularity rise of Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre, the Liberal Party of Canada has been floundering around looking for a campaign strategy that might actually make Canadians start to slightly like them again. And they've been absolutely failing. But as the Conservative Party convention has started up, the Liberal Party has launched their latest communication strategy that they truly believe will get Canadians back on their side. And it's called lying. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of lying before, but it's where you say something and you pretend it's the truth, but it's actually not, and it's blatantly false. And you might then say to me, Wyatt, but the Liberal Party's always lying. What are you talking about? This doesn't make any sense. And what I'm saying is, while yes, the Liberal Party is always lying, it's usually not as sad and pathetic as it currently is. Because the Liberal Party usually at least says something where if you squint, you can kind of see what they're saying. It's wrong, but it's wrong in like a nuanced and creative way. These days, the Liberals are basically just slinging mud, hopefully, like hoping that if they hit Poilievre with something that sounds bad, that maybe, suburban voters might move back over to Trudeau around the 905 in the Vancouver area. I don't think it's going to work, but I just want to break down some of the really stupid posts that they've been making as the Conservative Party convention has been moving forward. So this was the one that kind of kicked it all off on Twitter, was the Liberal Party posting this graphic and header, basically saying that the Conservative Party is far right and they want to cut services and they don't care about climate change or whatever, and they want like literally the bottom of the post is saying that they want to get like assault weapons back on the streets, as if like the Liberal Party have done anything to actually combat gang violence and gang shootings. Shootings on all the major cities in Canada are up, and it's because the Liberal Party and the federal government do not actually take crime seriously. There are so many like laws that they passed for bail reform and all sorts of other like reductions in sentences for drug and firearm crimes that have been enabling career criminals on the streets. But whatever, it's the Conservative Party who is going to let assault weapons back on streets because they don't want to target law-abiding Canadian gun owners. Law-abiding Canadian gun owners, by the way, are 1/3 as likely to commit a violent crime compared to the average citizen. That is how law-abiding a gun owner is in Canada. They know they don't want their gun license taken away, so they act extra cautiously when it comes to anything that could be considered a violation of any law in particular. Anyways, but that was how the Liberal Party started things off. And then it got much, much cringier because they started like, Pascal Saint-Onge, if I pronounced that incorrectly, I don't care. She posted this on Twitter while like a couple days before the convention, like that Liberal video. And she said, by refusing to commit to protecting Radio Canada, Poilievre is telling Francophones across the country that their communities and families deserve quality, and families don't deserve quality information and content in French. And like one thing, no. But Poilievre is saying that you shouldn't have government liberal propaganda in your language paid for by taxpayers on the airwaves. That's all he's saying. And to pretend that his contention has anything to do with other than like the actual ideology of the information coming out, that his problem has anything to do with like, oh, he hates French Canadians having quality information, is completely ridiculous. And if anything, Pascal is actually effectively trying to insinuate that French Canadian political YouTubers, independent radio stations, all that's not quality. Well, the only things that are quality are when taxpayer money goes towards it. That's how you know it's quality, is when people effectively have their money stolen from them to put out liberal propaganda on the CRTC regulated airwaves. Completely ridiculous. And I doubt that messaging is going to do anything. The vast majority of Canadians want the CBC defunded, and I don't doubt that that's any different in Quebec, especially because actually Quebec, I remember, has quite a few independent TV and radio stations, which are usually far more popular than CBC and Radio Canada. Anyways, moving on to the next one. This one was quite fun. Rachel, and I'm even going to try and pronounce the last names. I should have just said that going into this, that I'm not going to try and pronounce the last names. Raquel, a Liberal MP from some riding, said, the gun lobby actively bragging about their influence over Pierre Poilievre's Conservative Party. If the Conservatives had their way, military-style weapons would be back in our streets. The Liberal Party will never compromise in keeping Canadians safe. Then why are Canadians so much more in danger these days? Maybe you could answer that to me, Raquel. Like, why can't we at least throw down some laws that actually hold criminals in prison? Why can't we crack down on gun smuggling? Why can't we crack down on gang violence? Is it really the farmer who's protecting his property with his own rifle that's the problem here? I really don't remember that there's a lot of farmer gangs going around the country shooting up, inner city communities. Ridiculous. But this is what they think is going to play well, that the gun lobby is really big in the Conservative Party, as if they think that Canadians are so stupid. They're going to hear gun lobby and they're going to assume that it's like a bunch of cartels going around wanting every Canadian to have like some sort of revolver, even if they aren't legally licensed. The CCFR and the NFA and all the other gun lobby organizations, again, promote the responsible use of firearms. And again, Canadian gun owners are some of the most responsible people in terms of following law in Canada. Anyways, moving on to the next one. Going down the lobby trail, Diane, another last name, said, once again, the Conservatives talk out with both sides of the oath. While they claim to champion freedom, they're openly embracing anti-choice association of their convention. They're openly embracing anti-choice associations at their convention this weekend. Sorry, that was a little bit awkwardly wording for me. And it was like he's like Polyev is like violating his commitment to freedom by allowing a pro-life group to be at his convention. Wouldn't it be awfully anti-freedom to kick out a conservative pro-life lobbying group from being at the convention? That's completely ridiculous. And I believe that vast majority of Canadians are actually in favor of some restrictions on abortion. And it's not a restriction of freedom to say, maybe if you stab a pregnant mother, there should be an upgraded sentence. Maybe a ninth month abortion is a bit much. Maybe we should actually have some rules on like a practice that's not exactly super ethical. That's not an anti-freedom position, but that's what the Liberals consider freedom these days. Not freedom to be able to spend your own money, be able to have oversight over your kids at school, or be able to make any medical choices for yourself. That's not real freedom. It's only real freedom if you're aborting a child. That's what freedom's all about. But whatever. Anyways, but moving on. Here's another tweet from the Liberal Party. Right before the convention, they said, we're supporting provinces and territories to deliver better healthcare for Canadians, investing to reduce wait times, improve access, and support workers. Pierre Poilievre, he filibustered to block healthcare transfers. Now, what do you think actually went on there when Pierre Poilievre filibustered a healthcare transfer? He didn't vote against it. He just spoke while they were discussing some sort of a policy on healthcare in order to hold it up to maybe have an amendment added or something like that. When has Poilievre ever said he wanted to end healthcare transfers? Because that is what that tweet is implying. And that is a blatant lie. Unless they can point to Poilievre saying, I think we should get rid of healthcare transfers, they're effectively just trying to smear him with innuendo. It's completely ridiculous, and I don't think Canadians actually buy this crap, which is why the Liberal Party, like I'll show on screen, is literally at 26% in the latest Abacus data poll compared to the Conservatives' 40%. Anyways, moving on to a couple of the last posts. Of course, Stephen Guilbeault had to show up at this convention both through social media and, like I'll show later, also in real life. Stephen Guilbeault said, last time the Conservatives had a convention, they didn't agree that climate change is real. Okay, now let me just cut that off right there. The Conservative Party said no such thing. The Conservative Party has never denied that there's climate change. Even the people who voted in favor of the measure that he's trying to refer to believe climate change is real. Their whole contention is that Canada cutting back carbon emissions is not going to make a significant difference on the change of the climate. I remember the exact policy because I voted against the policy that Aaron O'Toole's people put forward, because it was worded in such a way to basically imply that unless the Conservative Party adopts a liberal-style carbon tax, that somehow we don't believe in climate change. And we didn't take the bait, so we just voted against it anyways, because we don't really care what the media thinks, because we don't want a stupid tax levied on us that does not help the climate and hurts Canadian families. That's what that was all about. But moving forward, Stephen Guilbeault then goes on to say, now after a year of climate catastrophe, climate catastrophe, this year's climate catastrophe? Stephen, your government has been in power for more than 8 years. What are you talking about? What have you guys been not doing that's been making this climate catastrophe happen? If you admit that it's out of your hands and that the government cannot control the climate, well, then you're on the conservative side of the aisle now. And if not, you have to admit all of your policies fail and you guys haven't been, working hard enough to actually stop these climate catastrophes from happening. And by the way, a lot of this could be solved with better forest management. If you let deadwood build up, you will have massive forest fires every once in a while. It's just how real life works. Sorry, Stephen. Anyway, sorry, I'm cutting myself off a lot here. Anyway, it says, now after a year of climate catastrophe, the only proposal are to gut environmental programs to make it free to pollute, and they think it will magically gut GHG. So much for a wise policy. What are you talking about? The policies that they're voting on would move Canadian natural gas and oil to be shipped overseas to replace things that are dirtier forms of energy like coal and burning wood, and even burning like human waste like they have to do in some countries because they do not have cheap and affordable energy. Frankly, if you do not support the exportation of Canadian energy, you're effectively saying that certain people on this world can stay poor and be more likely to die of exposure and other sorts of lack of resources. I don't really care about the environmentalist agenda that somehow it like that the only thing that matters is the climate. I think that what matters is actual human prosperity first and the climate second. If the climate is severely infringing on human prosperity, we should do something about it. Right now, people not having enough money to get by, people not having energy is a far bigger problem than the climate ever was. But anyways, moving on again. But he said, our government has put in place a leading emissions reduction plan and launched the first national adaptation strategy on climate. We achieved the best emissions reductions among G7 countries since the pandemic, and we are positioning our economy and our workers for a strong, healthier future. Now that's a very interesting metric. We achieved the best emissions reductions among G7 countries since the pandemic. Because in reality, the emissions have never actually gone down under Justin Trudeau's government. They've only gone up, and he's pinpointing the pandemic because that's when everyone was stuck in their homes and couldn't drive their cars. So in Stephen Guilbeault's fever-dreamed environmental utopia land, we should all be locked up in our houses, unable to drive our cars, or be in some sort of a state where we are not allowed to use our vehicles. That's the only reason that Canada reduced emissions more than other countries, because we happen to have harsher lockdowns than most other countries, so we didn't get to drive almost anywhere. We almost had to exclusively stay at home doing nothing. That's Stephen Guilbeault's environmentalist utopia plan, to basically make a way for us to not be able to drive at all. Because I guarantee you, if people are driving EVs, we would still have we'd probably still have sky-high emissions. We'd probably even have higher emissions because EVs actually tend to burn a lot more fuel than you would think, because, the actual grids that they're on are not exactly green, and green energy is not as green as people say it is. Anyways, but I just wanted to end this whole thing off by covering Stephen Guilbeault's fairly embarrassing trek out to the Conservative convention, get a little bit of attention for himself, and basically cry at Pierre Poilievre from outside the convention center, which I am not sure if he thinks is the win that he believes it is. But I just wanted to play this clip right here for everyone.
Frankly, it's very easy to attack Pierre Poilievre on the environment. Someone who claims to be a political leader in 2023 who does not even believe in climate change, who does not believe that we should be doing anything about climate change, who accused me of being the source of some of the forest fires we've seen. I suppose that environment...
Sorry, when did Pierre Poilievre accuse him of being the source of the fires? I don't think he ever did. He's just making stuff up.
Environmentalists are also responsible for tropical storms that we're seeing. That for the first time in history this year, we're having Category 5 hurricanes in all 7 water basin of the world. We've never seen that. I suppose that environmentalists are responsible for that as well.
This is a complete misnomer. There used to be far higher amounts of Category 4 and 5 hurricanes and tornadoes before the 1960s, and then there was a falling off point after the 1960s, and now we're just starting to have a few more Category 4 and 5 hurricanes than we've had over the past 50 years. But these things used to be extremely common around like the 1910s, 1920s. Just go back through the history. There's massive storms that would like just wipe out entire like towns, and you just like see like casualty ratings in the thousands back then. I was considered not normal, but it was like not unheard of for that to happen back in the day.
The floodings in Nova Scotia, is it environmentalists' fault? Ice storms. I mean, it's really easy to attack Pierre Poilievre. He yet again yesterday he falsely claimed that Ottawa is working to take away Quebecers' money to send it to Ottawa on carbon pricing. This is false. The Quebec government has its own system. They've had their own system for years, and Ottawa allowed them to keep their system because...
Now, this one ticks me off because I know the lie he's going for here. He's saying that because Quebec already had its own carbon tax, that the Liberal Party of Canada, the government of Canada, is not going to take money away from the Quebec government in carbon tax, basically like dues or fees. But that's completely false, because the thing is that you are allowed to keep your own program as long as your program kept up with the liberal standard on the carbon tax. The liberal federal standard on the carbon tax is the minimum. If you're like BC and yours is a little bit higher, the liberal government is not going to require you to pay more. But if it's under the limit, they will make you pay. So Stephen Guilbeault is just objectively lying. And because the Liberals have been raising their carbon tax so much, they're effectively forcing Quebec to adopt the federal standard or pay up to what the federal standard would require them to for emissions. But whatever, that's just, he just assumes that he'll throw out some technicality right there and everyone will go for it and like, no, not actually question what he's saying. And that's always what I find with a lot of the environmentalist activists, is that they'll tell you just sort of, they always get off on technicalities on somehow, like they're like, solar is actually fantastic, or wind actually generates more power and it's more efficient than like natural gas if you look at this extremely narrow metric. And that's exactly what I think Guilbeault's doing. But I just wanted to quickly jump over to another clip just from Andrew Lawton, because I think he asked Stephen Guilbeault a great question that Stephen Guilbeault did not exactly like.
You mentioned extreme events like wildfires and hurricanes. Why has your carbon tax not stopped those things if that is the answer to these problems?
This question, which I've heard in the House of Commons by many Conservative Party members, including Pierre Poilievre, is yet another example of the fundamental disbelief that you have in climate science and in science full stop. We won't solve climate change overnight, and we certainly won't solve climate change with empty slogans. It's
Oh yeah, we can't solve climate change with empty slogans. But I like how he accuses Andrew Lawton of somehow being anti-scientific because you don't believe that levying a tax on an inelastic good being gasoline is going to reduce emissions. It's impossible to reduce the use of a specific resource that people need to get by. If you tax food, people are not going to stop eating food. If you tax the gas that goes into people's vehicles that they need to get to work, they're not just going to start biking unless you raise the carbon tax by 5 or 6 times higher, which is ridiculous. But you're never going to stop people from driving their vehicles. Although, again, like we saw in Stephen Guilbeault's previous post, his great achievement was forcing people not to drive their cars by keeping them locked up at home. That was what he thought was a great victory. But you're somehow anti-scientific if you think that a redistributionary tax that doesn't actually go towards anything to do with the climate is somehow not reducing emissions. If you believe that it's not reducing emissions, you just hate science. And Stephen Guilbeault is here to teach you a lesson about it. Whatever. But this is the kind of stuff that the Liberal Party's been doing around the Conservative Convention. I think it's just truly pathetic. I don't think that they're going to be getting any I don't think they're going to get any juice out of this. The media is going to cover it. There's going to be op-eds saying that, the Liberals are right, the Conservatives are far right. Pierre Poilievre is intolerant. They do want children to get shot in the streets and stuff like that. But the average Canadian seeing the result of Liberal policies realizes that the fact that the Conservatives are advocating effectively for the opposite is probably a good thing, because the opposite of everything the Liberals have been pushing forward is probably exactly what Canada needs. Anyways, that should be it for me today. I have my normal donation links in the comments below. I'm being sued by a Chinese billionaire for defamation. Completely ridiculous. I'm currently winning the case, but I've had to pay over $15,000 into defending myself. And he actually just pushed back the questioning date by a month because I think he's trying to run away from this case right now. But if you can help donate to my Give, Send, Go, that really help sort of reduce the burden of costs on myself, as well as make sure to sign up for the TNT email list in the description below, because Ben Shapiro is having a live show in Southwest Calgary in November, on November 16th. And if you sign up on that TNT email list, I'll be making sure to put out an early bird ticket code so that you're able to buy the tickets for the event a few days before everyone else is able to get access to them, so that you can guarantee a spot at one of the 2 events happening on the 16th. Anyways, that should be it for me today, and I hope everyone has a lovely day.